These 10 real-life roadside horror stories will haunt your next night drive. Be careful. Story number 4 is so bone-chilling that 90% of people couldn't even finish it. Listen at your own risk. I've warned you.
Top 10 true terrifying ghost stories while driving alone at night. There is a specific kind of silence that only exists on the highway after 2 a.m. It is just you, the rhythmic thrum of tires on asphalt, and the reach of your headlights cutting through the black void. You feel safe inside your locked steel cage, but you are not alone. The rearview mirror is a liar, the empty passenger seat is waiting, and the road itself is hungry. From phantom lights floating in the ditch to exit ramps that lead into nightmares, the darkness outside your window is watching. Grip the wheel tight, lock the doors, and whatever you do not look in the back seat. Welcome to the drive that never ends.
Chapter 1. The Shoulder Lights. I was not supposed to be on that road. The thought looped in my mind, rhythmic and nagging, matching the hypnotic thump of my tires against the pavement cracks. The interstate had been a river of red taillights, choked by emergency construction, until the robotic voice of my GPS offered a way out. Recalculating, it had said, the voice devoid of pity. Take the next exit. Route changed. I took the exit. I shouldn't have. It was 1:36 in the morning. The detour led me away from the safety of the illuminated highway and onto a 2-lane blacktop that sliced through the heart of nowhere. The map called it County Road 9, but it looked like the end of the world. There were no farmhouses, no silos, just an endless wall of dead woods and telephone poles that marched into the gloom like skeletal sentries. The darkness here wasn't just an absence of light, it was a physical weight pressing against the glass. I had been driving for 20 minutes without seeing another car. The high beams of my sedan cut a cone of visibility through the mist, revealing nothing but gray asphalt and encroaching weeds. Then, I saw it. It started as a flicker in my rearview mirror, a trick of the eye. I blinked, rubbing the grit of exhaustion from my lashes, and looked again. There were lights behind me. At first, relief washed over me. Another traveler. I wasn't alone in this void. But the relief soured into confusion within seconds. They weren't headlights. They were wrong. They were too dim, a sickly jaundice yellow, and they were positioned strangely. They were too low. If it were a car, the lights would be waist high. If it were a motorcycle, it would be a single beam. These were 2 distinct points of luminescence, hovering maybe 6 inches off the ground. It looked like someone was walking along the gravel shoulder carrying 2 low-hanging lanterns. I checked the speedometer. I was doing 65 miles per hour. Reflection, I whispered to the empty cabin. My voice sounded thin and fragile. Just a reflection of the dashboard. But reflections don't drift. The light shifted. They moved from the center of the lane toward the right, hovering over the shoulder. They were tracking me. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I pressed down on the accelerator. The engine whined and protested as the needle climbed, 70, 75, 80. I glanced at the mirror. The lights were still there.
They hadn't fallen back an inch. They were perfectly synchronized with my bumper, maintaining that impossible proximity. My stomach dropped. Nothing travels that low to the ground at 80 miles per hour. Nothing mechanical. I lifted my foot off the gas. The car shuddered as it decelerated. 60, 40, 30. The lights slowed with me. They didn't overtake me. They didn't zoom past. They just waited. The silence in the car became suffocating. The air felt charged with static, the way it does before a lightning strike. I needed to know. I needed to understand what was chasing me. I cracked the driver's side window. The night air rushed in, freezing and smelling of wet rot and ozone. The wind roared, but beneath the mechanical hum of my engine and the hiss of tires, I heard a sound that made my blood run cold. Crunch, crunch, crunch. It was the sound of heavy footsteps striking gravel. It was a rhythmic, wet slapping sound, like bare meat hitting stone. It was incredibly fast, a rapid-fire staccato that matched the speed of my vehicle. crunch, 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 crunch. I was moving at 40 miles per hour, and something was running alongside my rear tire. Panic, primal and electric, seized my chest. I didn't think. I just reacted. I slammed on the brakes with both feet. The tires shrieked, burning rubber on the damp asphalt. The seatbelt locked, digging into my collarbone as the car fishtailed and came to a violent, shuddering halt in the middle of the road. Silence rushed back in, ringing in my ears. I couldn't breathe. I turned my head slowly, terrified of what I might see through the open window. Nothing. Just the tall, dead grass swaying in the wind and the empty stretch of gravel. I looked at the rearview mirror. Darkness. The yellow lights were gone. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding, a ragged gasp that fogged the windshield. Jesus, I hissed. You're losing it. You're just tired. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely shift the gear back into drive. I needed to get out of here. I needed lights, civilization, a gas station, anything. I pressed the gas. The car rolled forward. My headlights swept across the road ahead. And I screamed. They were there. 10 yards in front of my bumper, the 2 yellow lights. They weren't lanterns. They weren't reflections. They were unblinking, bioluminescent irises. They hovered low near the asphalt for a split second. And then, with a sickening fluid motion,
They rose. They lifted up, 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 until they were level with my face. A figure materialized in the wash of my high beams. It was pale, the color of a drowned thing. It had limbs that were too long, with extra joints that seemed to bend the wrong way. It was shaped like a man, but it was starving, skeletal, and it was walking backward. I was accelerating again, panic making me stomp the pedal, but the thing matched me. It stepped backward with impossible grace, its long, pale legs blurring as it kept perfect pace with my front bumper. It was leading me. As the car hit 50, the thing leaned in, its face pressed toward the windshield. It didn't have a nose, just 2 slit-like holes, but it had a mouth. It smiled. The smile split its face ear to ear, revealing rows of needle-thin, translucent teeth. It was enjoying this. It was playing with me. The eyes, those terrible yellow lantern eyes, locked onto mine. I felt a pressure in my skull, a violation of my mind. "Get out of the way," I screamed, but my voice was swallowed by the roar of the engine. I couldn't stop. If I stopped, it would get in. I knew that with absolute certainty. If I stopped, the glass would shatter, and that smile would be the last thing I ever saw. So I floored it. I aimed the 2-ton weapon of my car directly at the center of its chest. The speedometer hit 60. The thing didn't flinch. It just widened its smile, throwing its head back in a silent laugh. I braced for impact. I squeezed my eyes shut at the last second, waiting for the thud, the crunch of bone, the spray of fluid. Boom. The impact was like hitting a brick wall. The airbag detonated, a hot white punch to the face. The world spun. Metal screamed as the car flipped, tumbling off the road, rolling into the darkness of the dead woods. Glass shattered. The world went upside down, then sideways, then black. I woke up to the sound of a relentless ding, ding, ding. The door chime. I was hanging sideways, held in place by the seatbelt. The air smelled of sulfur from the airbag and burnt rubber. My head throbbed with a dull, rhythmic pain. I groaned, fumbling for the buckle. I fell against the shattered driver's side window, crawling out onto the cold, wet earth. I stood up, swaying, clutching my ribs. My car was a ruin. The front end was crumpled like tinfoil. Steam hissed from the radiator. But there was no blood on the bumper, no gore, no body. I limped toward the road.
My flashlight phone app cut a weak beam through the dark. I swept the light over the asphalt where the impact had happened. Nothing. Wait. I stepped closer, crouching down despite the pain in my side. There, in the soft tar of the shoulder, were impressions. Footprints. They were long, narrow, and barefoot. The toes were elongated, digging deep into the gravel. They started where I had slammed on the brakes, and they led away, off the road, disappearing into the dense, impenetrable woods. But the most terrifying thing wasn't the shape of them, it was the spacing. The stride between each footprint was 15 feet long. I scrambled back to the wreck, found my phone, and dialed 911. My fingers were numb. I don't drive on back roads anymore. I stick to the well-lit interstates, surrounded by other cars. But sometimes when I'm alone and the traffic thins out, I catch myself checking the rearview mirror. I look for the yellow lights. And sometimes, just for a second, I see them, hovering low, keeping pace, waiting for me to look away.
Chapter 2. Exit 12A. Routine is a dangerous thing. It makes you blind. I have driven the same stretch of Interstate 95 every night for 6 years. I know every pothole, every speed trap, and every faded billboard. I know that between exit 12, the turnoff for the shopping mall, and exit 13, the route to the airport, there is exactly 4 miles of nothing, just sound barriers and scrub trees. There is no exit 12A, or at least there wasn't until 3 weeks ago. It was a Tuesday, the kind of Tuesday that feels like it has lasted a week. My eyes were burning with the specific grit of 12 hours staring at a computer screen. The radio was low, playing a classic rock station that was mostly static. I was on autopilot, my brain already half asleep, letting muscle memory guide the steering wheel. Then, the green flash caught my eye. It was a brand new highway sign, crisp and highly reflective, hanging over the right lane. Exit 12A, Industrial Park. I frowned. I checked my rearview mirror, but the road behind me was empty. I looked back at the sign. It was real. Massive green metal, white lettering. It looked official. I didn't remember an industrial park being built. I didn't remember construction crews. I didn't remember seeing the ramp being paved. But my bladder was full, and the gas light had just chimed on the dashboard. Logic told me to wait for exit 13, but exhaustion is a heavy hand, and it steered me right. I clicked my turn signal. The ticking sound seemed deafening in the quiet car. I took the ramp. Immediately, the atmosphere changed. The hum of the interstate vanished, cut off as if someone had thrown a soundproof blanket over the world. The ramp was long, too long. It spiraled downward in a tight banking curve that seemed to go on for miles. It felt less like an exit and more like a descent into the earth. My ears popped. I glanced at the GPS on my dashboard. The little blue arrow was spinning in circles, confused, floating in a sea of gray digital nothingness. Then the screen flickered and went black. "Great," I muttered. My voice sounded flat, deadened by the upholstery. The ramp finally leveled out. I emerged into a landscape that made no sense. The sign had said Industrial Park, and technically that is what it was, but it was colossal. Massive windowless warehouses rose up on either side of the road like concrete canyons. They were featureless monoliths, devoid of logos or loading docks, just sheer, gray walls stretching up into a sky that had no stars. There were no streetlights here. The only illumination came from my high beams, cutting a fragile path through the oppressive gloom. I drove slowly, 10 miles per hour. There were no other cars, no parked trucks, no security guards, no signs of life, just the concrete and the asphalt and the silence. The road didn't branch. It led straight ahead, deeper into the complex, until it terminated in a large circular cul-de-sac. In the center of the circle stood a single flickering sodium vapor streetlight. It cast a sickly orange cone of illumination onto the pavement. And parked directly beneath it was a car. My foot hovered over the brake. It was a gray sedan, a 2018 model. It was my car. I stopped 20 feet away, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I stared through the windshield. It was the same make, the same model, the same color. It even had the dent on the rear bumper where I had backed into a mailbox 2 years ago. "This isn't real," I whispered. "I'm asleep. I fell asleep at the wheel." But the cold air coming from my vents felt real. The vibration of the engine felt real. The driver's side door of the other car was wide open. A terrible curiosity took hold of me. It was that primal urge to look at a car wreck, the compulsion to witness the horrific. I put my car in park. I didn't turn it off. I left the headlights on, bathing the other vehicle in light. I stepped out. The silence of the place was physical. It pressed against my eardrums. The air smelled stagnant, metallic, like old copper and ozone. I walked toward the duplicate car. My footsteps echoed too loudly, bouncing off the warehouse walls like gunshots. As I got closer, I saw the interior. The upholstery was the same cheap fabric. The travel mug and the cup holder was identical to the one sitting in my own car right now. And then I saw the driver. He was slumped forward, his chest pressed against the steering wheel. He was wearing a blue button-down shirt. I looked down at my own chest. I was wearing a blue button-down shirt. A wave of dizziness hit me. I grabbed the open door frame to steady myself. The metal was ice cold. "Hey," I croaked. The figure didn't move. I leaned in. I had to know. I had to see his face. I reached out a trembling hand and touched the shoulder. It was stiff, solid. I pulled him back against the seat. The head lolled back loosely.
And the dome light flickered on, illuminating the face. It was me. But it was a version of me that had been destroyed. A jagged gash ran from the hairline to the jaw, exposing white bone. Blood, dark and viscous, matted the hair and stained the collar of the shirt. The eyes were wide open, staring up at the roof of the car with a glazed, milky expression of absolute terror. I stumbled back, a scream trapped in my throat. "No!" I gasped. "No, no, no!" I turned to run. I needed to get back to my car. I needed to leave. Click. The sound came from inside the dead car. I froze. Slowly, terrifyingly, the corpse shifted. The head, which had been lolling against the headrest, snapped upright with a wet crack. The milky eyes rolled in their sockets, focusing. They locked onto mine. There was no life in them, but there was intent, a dark, malicious intelligence that burned behind the dead tissue. The jaw unhinged, the lips peeling back from blood-stained teeth. It spoke. It wasn't a zombie groan. It was my voice, my exact voice, recorded and played back through a speaker made of rotting meat. Don't come back tomorrow. The single streetlight above us exploded. Sparks rained down like fireworks. Total darkness swallowed the cul-de-sac. I screamed then. I scrambled blindly through the blackness, my hands outstretched, feeling for my car. I found the handle. I threw myself inside. I locked the doors. I didn't look back. I threw the transmission into reverse and floored it. I drove like a maniac. I tore back down the straight road, past the silent warehouses, up the spiraling ramp. When I burst back onto the interstate, the transition was jarring. The noise of traffic, the glare of city lights, the blaring of a horn as I merged too aggressively. I was back. I hyperventilated all the way home. I sat in my driveway for an hour, shaking, unable to turn off the engine. I told myself it was a hallucination, a micro-sleep nightmare, stress. But tonight, on my way home, I saw it again. Exit 12A. The sign was there. The green reflective letters taunting me. I didn't take it. I sped past, gripping the wheel until my hands hurt. But as I passed the ramp, I looked. I couldn't help it. Down at the bottom of the curve, deep in the shadow, I saw headlights. They were stationary, pointing up the ramp, waiting. And as I drove by, I saw the steam rising from the tailpipe. The other car is running now. And I know, with a sickening certainty,
that tomorrow night, it won't be waiting at the bottom of the ramp. It will be waiting on the highway.
Chapter 3: The Backseat Wait. The gig economy does not sleep. It just gets stranger. I drive for a rideshare app called Liftline. I prefer the graveyard shift. The roads are clear, the traffic lights are mostly blinking yellow, and the passengers are usually too drunk to talk. I like the silence. It gives me time to think, to listen to podcasts, to exist in a bubble of climate-controlled isolation. But at 2:14 a.m. on a Tuesday, the silence felt heavy. I was idling on the shoulder of Route 9, a stretch of highway that cuts through the marshlands south of the city. The fog was rolling in off the water, thick and gray, swirling in the red glow of my taillights. Ping. The sound of the app shattered the quiet. I jumped, my heart skipping a beat. I looked at the phone mounted on my dashboard. A ride request. Passenger. No name. Rating 5.0 stars. New user. Pickup. Current location. Destination. Hidden. It was weird. Usually there's a name. Mike or Sarah or even a fake handle like Partyboy22. But this field was blank. And the pickup location wasn't an address. It was a set of GPS coordinates. I looked at the map. The pin was right on top of me. I frowned, looking out the window. There's nobody here, I muttered. I was about to hit decline when I heard it. Click. The sound of a door handle being pulled. My blood ran cold. I hadn't unlocked the doors. I kept them locked specifically to avoid people jumping in. But the rear passenger door swung open. I whipped my head around. The dome light didn't come on. I had disabled it weeks ago because of a fuse issue. The back seat was a cavern of shadow. Hello? I called out, my hand hovering near the pepper spray I kept in the center console. No answer. The door remained open, swinging slightly in the wind. The fog drifted into the cabin, bringing the smell of the marsh with it. Is anyone there? Silence. I unbuckled my seatbelt, ready to get out and close the door, assuming the latch had just malfunctioned. Then the car moved. It wasn't the wind. The entire chassis of the vehicle dipped low and hard to the right. The suspension groaned under a sudden, massive weight. It was the unmistakable sensation of a heavy person throwing themselves onto the back seat. The car rocked, settling on its springs. Slam! The door pulled itself shut. I sat frozen, staring into the rearview mirror. I could see the headrests of the back seat. I could see the rear window. I could not see a passenger.
Okay, I said, my voice trembling. Very funny. Get out. Nothing. I turned around in my seat, shining the flashlight from my phone into the back. Empty. The black leather seats were vacant. The floor mats were clear. But the car was still listing to the right. I could feel the imbalance. The physics of it were undeniable. There was 300 pounds of something sitting directly behind me. Ping. The app updated. Ride started. Destination, St. Jude's Memorial Park. Time, 42 minutes. My throat went dry. St. Jude's was an old cemetery on the north side of the county. I'm not driving, I whispered. I'm canceling. I reached for the phone. Suddenly, the air in the car changed. The temperature plummeted, instantly fogging the windows. And then came the smell. It was vile. It smelled like wet wool, stagnant pond water, and deep, cloying rot. It was the smell of a basement that had been flooded for years. And then, right behind my right ear, I heard a sound that made my skin crawl off my bones. Drip. 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 Fluid was hitting the floor mat. Then came the breathing. It was wet and rattled, like air forcing its way through lungs filled with sludge. My finger hovered over the cancel button. Drive, a voice gurgled. It didn't come from a mouth. It sounded like it came from the upholstery itself, vibrating through the frame of the car. I didn't want to drive. I wanted to tuck and roll out of the vehicle, but my body betrayed me. Terror locked my muscles. My foot found the gas pedal. My hands gripped the wheel. I pulled onto the highway. The drive was an eternity. Every bump in the road made the car sway heavily to the right. The suspension squeaked in protest. The smell grew worse, filling my nose, coating my tongue with the taste of copper and mud. I kept glancing in the mirror. Nothing, just the empty seat. But then, about 20 minutes in, I saw the condensation on the rear windshield. The glass was fogged up from the cold inside the car, and in the center of the fog, a shape was forming. A handprint. It was pressing against the glass, but it wasn't pressing from the outside. It was pressing from the inside. The fingers were too long, the palm was too wide. And as I watched, the print slit slowly down the glass,
leaving a trail of clear streaks. "Please," I whimpered. "What do you want?" The breathing was louder now, closer.
I could feel the cold dampness radiating against the back of my neck. I couldn't take it anymore. I slammed on the brakes. The car skidded to a halt on the empty road. I didn't care about the rating. I didn't care about the job. I threw the door open and scrambled out into the night air, gasping, retching from the smell. I ran to the back door and ripped it open. "Get out!" I screamed. "Get the hell out of my car!" The dome light flickered on for a split second. The back seat was empty, but the leather was soaked. A dark, viscous puddle had pooled in the bucket seat, dripping steadily onto the floor mat. It looked like someone had just pulled themselves out of a swamp and sat there for half an hour. I stood there on the side of the road, shaking, staring at the wet seat. The car was level again. The weight was gone. I grabbed a towel from my trunk, I kept it for cleaning spills, and threw it over the mess. I just wanted to go home. I was going to quit, tonight, right now. I got back in the driver's seat. I reached for my phone to close the app. Ping. "You have arrived." I frowned. I wasn't at the cemetery. I was still 10 miles away. I looked out the windshield. My headlights illuminated a rusted iron gate. I wasn't on the highway anymore. I don't know how, but I was parked on a gravel path. Rows of crooked tombstones stretched out into the darkness on either side of the car. I was in the middle of the cemetery. "Passenger drop-off complete," the mechanical voice of the GPS announced. Click. The back door unlocked itself. I held my breath. The car shifted. The springs groaned as the weight lifted. It felt like someone standing up and exiting the vehicle. The back door didn't open physically, but the presence left. The cold air dissipated. The breathing stopped. I let out a sob of relief. "It's over," I whispered. "It's over." I put the car in drive. I needed to find the exit. Then the car moved again. It didn't dip to the right this time. The front of the car pitched upward. The headlights shot toward the sky, illuminating the tops of the dipped trees. The rear of the car sank down, low, heavy. Something massive had just settled onto the rear axle, not in the back seat, in the trunk. I heard the latch of the trunk click, not opening, locking, and from beneath the floorboards of the car, muffled by the spare tire and the metal chassis, the wet, rattling breathing started again.
"New destination added," the app chirped. I looked at the screen. Destination, the lake. The gas pedal depressed itself. The steering wheel turned in my hands, and we began to drive.
Chapter 4, Mile Marker 66. Nevada is not just a state. At night, it is a void. The Great Basin swallows light. Once you leave the neon glow of Reno or Las Vegas, the world shrinks down to the cone of your high beams and the reflective paint of the center line. There is no horizon, there is no sky. There is only the black wall of the desert and the hypnotic, rhythmic thump of tires on asphalt. I had been driving for 4 hours on US Route 50. They call it the loneliest road in America. It is a title well earned. I hadn't seen another pair of headlights since I passed a slumbering gas station in Austin an hour ago. The dashboard clock read 3:32 a.m. I was fighting the hypnosis of the road, sipping lukewarm coffee, listening to a classic rock station that was slowly losing its battle with the static of the open range. Then I saw the green metal sign flash past on the right shoulder, Mile 66. The moment the number registered in my brain, the radio died. It didn't fade out, it didn't crackle into white noise, it cut out completely, as if someone had severed the power cord. The silence that filled the cabin was sudden and absolute. I reached out to fiddle with the volume knob. "Come on," I muttered. Then the sound returned. But it wasn't music, and it wasn't static. It was a sound that triggered a primal spike of adrenaline in my brainstem. It was the sound of a child crying. It was soft at first, tinny, as if coming from a great distance, a high-pitched, terrified whimpering. "Hello?" I said, my voice sounding too loud in the confined space. I tapped the display screen. It was black. The crying got louder. It wasn't coming from the speakers anymore. The acoustics shifted. The sound was no longer electronic. It was wet, breathless, and hyper-realistic. It was coming from the back seat.
My eyes shot to the rearview mirror. The back seat was empty, just my gym bag and a pile of fast food wrappers. "Dad?" The voice was right behind my ear. A little girl, maybe 5 years old. Her voice was trembling, thick with tears and snot. "Dad, it hurts." I slammed on the brakes. The tires locked up, screeching against the tarmac as I skidded to a halt in the middle of the eastbound lane. The car rocked on its suspension. I whipped around, my arm flailing to turn on the dome light. "Who's there?" I shouted. Yellow light flooded the cabin. Empty. The leather seats were pristine. There was no little girl.
My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I don't have children. I have never been married. I was alone in a rental car in the middle of the Nevada desert. "You're tired," I told myself, my voice shaking. Auditory hallucination, sleep deprivation. You need to pull over and rest. I turned back to the steering wheel. The dashboard clock blinked. 3:33 a.m. And then, the smell hit me. It was thick, pungent, and chemical. Gasoline. It wasn't a faint whiff. It was overwhelming, stinging my eyes and burning my throat. It smelled like a fuel line had ruptured inside the cabin. What the? I reached for the door handle, panic rising. I needed fresh air. But before I could open the door, the sound changed. The crying stopped. It was replaced by a wet, gurgling cough, the sound of lungs trying to draw air through fluid. "Dad," the voice whispered, bubbling. "Why didn't you stop?" I looked down at my hands. They were gripping the steering wheel, but they weren't my hands anymore. They were covered in blood, thick, dark, arterial blood. It coated my fingers, slick and warm. Shards of safety glass were embedded in my knuckles. I gasped and looked up. The road was gone. I wasn't in a car. I was standing in the sand. The night air was freezing. The wind howled through sagebrush. 10 yards in front of me, illuminated by the dying flicker of a small fire, was a car. It was upside down. The roof was crushed flat against the desert floor. The wheels were spinning lazily in the air. Smoke billowed from the undercarriage, carrying that choking stench of raw fuel. I tried to move, but my feet were heavy, sinking into the soft sand. I knew this car. It wasn't the rental. It was an old sedan I had driven 10 years ago. I stumbled forward. "Is anyone there?" I screamed. I crawled toward the wreck. The driver's side was crushed. I couldn't see inside. I dragged myself around to the back. The rear window was shattered. I looked inside. There was a car seat, a pink booster seat, strapped in tight. It was empty. The straps were unbuckled. "Where are you?" I sobbed. I didn't know who I was looking for, but the grief was a physical weight, crushing my chest. "Where are you?" Something grabbed my ankle. I looked down. A small hand, pale and covered in soot, was gripping my pant leg. I followed the arm to the darkness beneath the crushed roof. 2 eyes stared out at me. They were glassy, fixed. "You left me," the voice whispered. But the lips didn't move. The smell of gasoline intensified, suffocating me. A spark popped from the engine block. The world went white. I gasped, sucking in a lungful of conditioned air. I was gripping the steering wheel. I was doing 65 miles per hour. The headlights were cutting through the darkness. The road stretched out ahead, unbroken and empty. I looked at my hands. Clean, no blood, no glass. I looked at the rearview mirror. Empty back seat. I slammed my foot on the brake, pulling onto the gravel shoulder. I threw the door open and scrambled out, falling onto my knees in the dirt. I dry heaved until my stomach muscles cramped. I stood up, wiping my mouth. The desert was silent. No wreck, no fire, just the wind and the stars. It was a dream, I choked out. Microsleep. I nodded off. I walked around the car. No scratches. No dents. I got back in. I couldn't stay here. I had to get to a town. I had to get to lights. I started the engine. The clock read 3:34 a.m. I pulled back onto the highway. My hands were trembling so hard I could barely keep the car in the lane. I drove for what felt like an hour. I pushed the speedometer to 90. I just wanted to see a town. Then I saw a green sign ahead. Relief washed over me.
A mile marker. It meant I was making progress. I sped past it. Mile 66. My blood froze. That wasn't possible. I had passed mile 66 20 minutes ago. I had been driving east. The number should be going up or down, but not staying the same. Maybe I misread the first one. Maybe the first one was 65. I kept driving. My eyes were glued to the shoulder. 5 minutes later, another sign. Mile 66. No, I whispered. The radio cut out. The silence returned. And from the back seat, the soft, terrified whimpering began again. Dad? I didn't stop this time. I floored it. The engine roared. The needle buried itself past 100. Dad, I'm cold. The smell of gasoline filled the car. Mile 66. The sign flashed by again. Dad, please. The coughing started. The wet, rattling gurgle. Mile 66. I looked in the mirror. This time the seat wasn't empty. In the flash of a passing reflector, I saw a shape. Small, twisted, and it was leaning forward, reaching for my neck. The road ahead isn't ending. The numbers aren't changing. And the crying is getting closer.
Chapter 5. The Truck in the Fog. Weather in the mountains is not a gradual shift, it is an ambush. I was crossing the Appalachian Gap, the winding road carved into the side of the Black Peaks like a scar. 1 minute, the sky was clear, a tapestry of cold stars hanging over the valley. The next, the world was white. The fog didn't roll in, it dropped. It fell from the sky like a heavy, wet blanket, instantly suffocating the world. Visibility dropped to 0. The yellow lines of the road vanished. The guardrails became rumors. I was driving inside a cloud, my headlights reflecting back at me in a blinding, milky glare. I hunched forward, chest pressed against the steering wheel, knuckles white, straining to see 5 feet in front of the hood. I tapped the brakes, slowing to a crawl. 15 miles per hour. It felt too fast. Then, the light hit me. It came from behind, a sudden, searing eruption of luminescence that flooded my cabin. I squinted, tilting the rearview mirror to deflect the glare. It was intense, twin beams of pure, white-hot energy cutting through the fog like lasers. They were high up. A truck. A big rig. I tapped my brakes again, flashing my taillights, a universal signal. Back off, it's dangerous. The lights didn't flinch. They didn't dim. They sat there, huge and unwavering, filling my entire rear field of vision. I sped up slightly, pushing to 25, risking the curves to get some distance. The lights surged forward instantly. They stayed exactly 10 feet off my bumper. I could feel the size of the thing behind me. The displacement of air rattled my rear window. The rumble of a massive diesel engine vibrated through the chassis of my sedan, shaking my teeth. Pass me, I hissed through clenched teeth. Just pass me, you maniac. But there was no passing lane, just the winding 2-lane blacktop with a cliff on one side and a rock face on the other. We drove like that for miles, a tandem nightmare. Me, blinded by the fog in front and the lights behind. Him, pushing me, bullying me down the mountain. The fog grew denser. It was a physical weight now, swirling against the glass. I lost the road completely. I was steering by instinct, praying the asphalt was still under my tires. And that was when the fear truly set in. I couldn't see the road. I couldn't see the curves. But the truck could. It never wavered. It never drifted. It anticipated every twist of the mountain pass with supernatural precision.
When the road banked left, the lights shifted left instantly. When it dipped, they dipped. It wasn't following me, it was hurting me. Then, without warning, the high beams cut out. The darkness that followed was total. It was like going blind. The sudden absence of that searing light left purple spots dancing in my vision. I let out a breath, my shoulders dropping. Maybe he had turned off. Maybe he had pulled over. I checked the mirror. My blood turned to ice. I could still see it. My own taillights cast a weak red glow into the mist behind me, and in that bloody red haze, I saw the outline. It was colossal. It was far taller than any standard semi-truck. The cab was a monolithic slab of rusted iron, rising up into the fog like a fortress. There were no running lights, no chrome, just a dark, hulking shape that absorbed the light. And it was closer now. It was inches from my bumper. I listened. I expected to hear the roar of the engine, the hiss of air brakes, the rumble of 18 wheels, but there was no engine noise. Instead, there was a sound that made me want to tear my ears off. Screech. It was the sound of metal being dragged across asphalt under immense pressure. It was a high-pitched grinding shriek that echoed off the canyon walls. I looked lower, toward the road. Sparks were flying. Showers of orange and blue sparks cascaded from the bottom of the truck, lighting up the fog like a fireworks display. There were no wheels. The truck didn't have tires. It didn't have a suspension. The massive metal body was simply dragging along the road, grinding the pavement to dust, propelled by a force I couldn't understand. I stared, paralyzed, at the windshield of the truck. The sparks illuminated the interior of the cab in erratic, strobe light flashes. There was no driver. The steering wheel was empty. The seat was tattered. But the cab wasn't empty. Pressed against the glass from the inside was a shape. It looked like a person, but it was wrong. It was dark and fluid, like a shadow trapped in a box. It had hands, dozens of them, pressed flat against the windshield. They were frantically clawing at the glass, smearing it. And a face pressed so hard against the windshield that the features were flattened and distorted. The mouth was open in a silent, eternal scream. It wasn't driving the truck. It was trying to get out. The truck surged forward. Bam! It tapped my bumper. The impact sent my car lurching forward. I fought the wheel, fishtailing on the slick road. Screech! It was right on top of me. The sparks were washing over my trunk. The heat was palpable. No! I screamed. No! I floored it. I didn't care about the fog. I didn't care about the cliff. I just needed to be away from that grinding, wheelless monstrosity. I hit 60, blind. The grinding noise reached a crescendo, a deafening roar of metal on stone. And then, silence. The fog vanished. It didn't lift. It didn't fade. It simply ceased to exist. I burst out of the gray wall into crystal clear night air. The moon was high and bright. The road stretched out straight and empty before me. I looked in the rearview mirror. Nothing. Just the empty highway and the distant, dark silhouette of the mountains. I didn't stop. I didn't slow down until I reached the valley floor, until I saw the lights of a 24-hour diner. I pulled into the parking lot, my hands shaking so badly I couldn't turn the key to kill the ignition. I sat there for 20 minutes, just breathing, listening to the normal sounds of the highway. Finally, I stepped out. I walked to the back of my car. The plastic of my rear bumper was cracked, melted in the center. And on the asphalt of the parking lot, directly behind my tires, the ground was scarred. 2 deep, parallel grooves were etched into the blacktop. They were smoking slightly. They followed me. I live in the city now. I park in a garage. I don't drive in the mountains. But sometimes, when the weather turns, and the heavy gray mist settles over the streets, I hear it. I'll be sitting at a red light, and I'll feel a gentle thud against my rear bumper. I don't look in the mirror. I just wait for the light to change, and I listen for the sound of dragging metal. Tap, 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 waiting for the fog.
Chapter 6: Red Light on an Empty Road. There are roads in the American Midwest that do not seem to adhere to the laws of geography. They are straight, flat lines drawn with a ruler across an endless canvas of corn and wheat. You can drive for hours without turning the wheel, hypnotized by the rhythmic thump of the tires and the ocean of black stalks swaying in the wind. I was on one of these roads, County Road 44, a ribbon of asphalt cutting through the heart of nowhere, Nebraska.
It was 2:15 in the morning. I hadn't seen a house, a barn, or another pair of headlights for 40 miles. The world outside my windows was a void, consumed by a darkness so complete it felt heavy. Then I saw the glow. It appeared on the horizon, a faint crimson smudge against the black sky. At first, I thought it was a radio tower blinking in the distance, but as I drew closer, the light didn't blink. It was solid, unwavering, and it was directly over the road. I lifted my foot off the gas, confusion fighting through my exhaustion. This was farmland. There were no cross streets here, no intersections, no civilization, just the 2 lanes and the ditches. But there it was, a traffic light. It hung suspended in the air about 20 feet off the ground. I couldn't see a pole, I couldn't see a wire. The darkness above it was absolute, making the fixture look like it was floating in the void. And it was red, a deep, angry, blood-colored red that saturated the air. Instinct is a funny thing. Even in the middle of nowhere, even when the situation is impossible, the brain follows the rules it was trained to obey. I pressed the brake. My car slowed, the tires crunching over loose gravel as I came to a smooth stop just behind the painted white line. I sat there, idling. The silence of the plains rushed in. Usually you can hear crickets, the wind, the rustle of the crops. But tonight there was nothing, just the low purr of my engine and the hum of the heater. I looked left. A wall of corn, bathed in the red light, looking like a sea of blood. I looked right. More corn. There was no cross traffic. There was no road to cross. The asphalt just continued straight ahead, disappearing into the dark beneath the red signal. "Come on," I whispered, tapping my fingers on the steering wheel. "Change." I waited. 1 minute passed, then 2. The red light burned into my retinas. It felt aggressive. It wasn't just a signal. It felt like an eye, a single, unblinking eye staring down at my windshield, judging me, daring me. "3 minutes. A sense of unease began to crawl up my spine. It started at the base of my neck and spread outward, a cold prickle that made the hair on my arms stand up. I felt exposed. I felt like a bug pinned under a microscope slide. "This is stupid," I said aloud. The sound of my own voice startled me. It sounded too loud, too desperate. I checked my rearview mirror. Nothing but blackness behind me. 5 minutes. I couldn't take it anymore. The absurdity of sitting at a red light in the middle of a cornfield at 2 a.m. was losing to the creeping dread that I was sitting in a trap. "Screw it," I muttered. I took my foot off the brake. I pressed the gas. The car rolled forward. The front bumper crossed the white line. Click. The sound was immediate and final. It wasn't a mechanical failure. It was the sound of energy simply leaving the world. My engine died instantly. The dashboard lights winked out. The headlights died. The heater fan spun down into silence. Total, suffocating darkness swallowed me. "No, no, no," I hissed, twisting the key in the ignition. Nothing. The engine didn't even crank, it was dead. A brick. I reached for my phone. I pressed the side button. The screen remained black. Panic flared in my chest, hot and sharp. I was blind. I couldn't see my hand in front of my face.
I stared at the figure in the road. It was taller than the others. Its arms hung down past its knees. It seemed to be looking at me, even without eyes. Then, above me, the mechanism clicked. The light changed. The red clicked off, and a vibrant, sickly green washed over the scene. Green means go, but the car didn't move. Instead, the silhouettes moved. In perfect, terrified unison, every single one of them took a step forward. It wasn't a walk, it was a lurch, a sudden, jerky movement that closed the distance by half. The figure in the road was now 10 feet from my bumper. I screamed. I slammed my hands against the steering wheel, screaming for the car to move, for the nightmare to end. They took another step, 5 feet. I could see the texture of them now. They weren't wearing clothes. Their skin looked like scorched wood, rough and cracked. Another step. They were at the windows. The tall one in front leaned down. Its face, a smooth, blank surface of charred flesh, pressed against the windshield. It raised a long, spindly hand. And then, everything went white. I gasped, my lungs filling with air as if I had been underwater for minutes. I was sitting in my driveway. The sun was just beginning to crest over the suburban rooftops, painting the sky in soft pinks and purples. Birds were chirping. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my fingers were locked in claws. I looked around wildly. My house, my lawn, my garage door. The car was idling smoothly. The radio was playing a morning talk show. What? I croaked. I looked at the clock, 6:15 a.m. I had lost 4 hours. I turned off the car. My legs were jelly as I stepped out onto the driveway. I felt sick, dizzy, like my brain had been shaken loose in my skull. I walked to the front of the car. I touched the hood. It was scorching hot. The engine had been running hard. I stumbled toward my front door, fumbling for my keys. I just wanted to get inside. I wanted a shower. I wanted to forget the corn, the silhouettes, the green light. I got inside, locked the deadbolt, and collapsed onto my couch. I told myself it was a fugue state, a seizure, something medical. But then night fell. I was in my bedroom, on the second floor. I was trying to read, trying to ignore the anxiety that clawed at my stomach every time I looked at the window. Then I heard it. Click. It was faint, mechanical, the sound of a relay switching. I froze. Click. I slowly turned my head toward the window. The curtains were drawn, but they were thin, and through the fabric, a light was shining. It wasn't the white glow of a street light. It wasn't the yellow of a porch lamp. It was red. Deep, angry, blood-colored red. It pulsed through the room, bathing my walls in crimson. I didn't go to the window. I didn't look out. I knew what was out there. I knew that if I waited long enough, the click would come again. The light would turn green, and whatever was standing on my front lawn would take the final step toward my door. Chapter 7. The Passenger Who Knew. Solitude in a car is an illusion. We tell ourselves we are alone, insulated by glass and steel, but the space beside us is always waiting to be filled. I was driving north on Interstate 81. It was late, maybe 3 a.m. The kind of late where the lines on the road start to detach from the asphalt and float in your vision. I was tired, my eyelids heavy, my brain fuzzy with the drone of the tires. I blinked. Just a long, slow blink to clear the grit from my eyes. When I opened them, I wasn't alone. Someone was sitting in the passenger seat. I didn't scream, I didn't swerve. The shock was so total, so absolute that my brain simply refused to process it. I just gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles popped, staring straight ahead at the road. "Keep your eyes on the lane," a voice said. It was calm, measured, a baritone devoid of emotion. I risked a glance. He was a middle-aged man. He wore a gray suit that looked expensive but dated, like something from the 90s. His hair was neatly combed. His hands rested folded in his lap. He wasn't wearing a seatbelt. He looked solid, real. I could smell his cologne, a mix of sandalwood and old paper.
"Who are you?" I whispered. My voice was a dry croak. He didn't look at me. He watched the road with an intensity that was unsettling. "You're going to swerve in 30 seconds, he said. "What?" 30 seconds. A deer. It will come from the left. You will overcorrect. You will hit the guardrail at 70 miles per hour. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. Get out of my car. 25 seconds. I looked at the speedometer. I was doing 72. I took my foot off the gas. "Don't slow down," he said sharply. "It changes the timing. If you slow down, the semi-truck behind you hits us instead. That one is messy. Fire. Screaming." I checked the rearview mirror. 2 headlights were indeed approaching fast in the left lane. "Who are you?" I asked again, louder this time. 20 seconds. I was sweating now, cold, clammy sweat running down my back. The road ahead was empty, just black asphalt and trees. "There's no deer," I said. "You're crazy. I'm pulling over." 15. The truck behind me moved to pass. Its engine roared as it pulled alongside. 10. The passenger finally turned his head. His eyes were pale gray. They looked old, ancient. "Brace yourself," he said softly. 5. I saw movement in the brush on the left.
4. A shape burst from the trees. 3. It was a buck. Massive antlers. It leaped the median barrier with impossible grace. 2. It landed directly in my lane. 1. I didn't think. Instinct took over. I yanked the wheel to the right. The tires screamed. The car lurched violently. The world tilted. I saw the guardrail rushing toward the windshield. Metal twisted. Glass exploded inward in a shower of diamonds. The airbag detonated. A hot white punch to the face. Then the world went black. Silence. Then a voice. Again. I opened my eyes. I was driving north on Interstate 81. My hands were on the wheel. The speedometer read 72. The road was empty. I gasped, sucking in air, checking my body. No pain. No blood. The windshield was intact. I looked to my right. The man in the gray suit was still there. He was checking his watch. "That was attempt number 412, he said. "You're getting sloppy." My mind reeled. What? I crashed. I felt it. "You died," he corrected. Neck snapped on impact. Quick. Cleaner than the fire. "I don't understand," I sobbed. "What is happening?" He sighed, a sound of infinite patience and infinite weariness. "We are trying to get you home, but you keep dying." "Let me out," I begged. "Please, just let me stop the car." "If you stop," he said, "you die. Heart attack, aneurysm, falling asleep and drifting into a bridge abutment. We've tried stopping. It doesn't work. The only way out is through." He pointed at the windshield. "You have a patch of black ice coming up. Mile marker 108. You won't see it. You'll spin out." "When?" I choked out. 40 seconds. I looked at the road. It looked dry. "Why are you doing this?" "Because you asked for help," he said. "Or you will." In the split second before the first crash, you begged for another chance. He looked at me, and for the first time his expression softened. It was a look of profound pity. "We have done this 1,000 times.
he whispered. And every time, you miss the turn. You miss the brake. You miss the sign. 30 seconds. I gripped the wheel. Tell me what to do. Ease off the gas. Do not touch the brake. Steer into the skid. Gently. I nodded, tears streaming down my face. Okay? Okay. 20 seconds. I looked out the window. And that's when I saw them. In the ditch beside the highway. Overturned cars. Dozens of them. Hundreds. They were all the same make. The same model.
The same color as mine. Some were rusted skeletons. Some were fresh wrecks, smoke still rising from the engines. Some were crushed flat. And inside every single one of them was me. I saw myself hanging from a seatbelt. I saw myself crushed against the dashboard. I saw myself staring up at the sky with dead, glassy eyes. A graveyard of my own failures stretching out for miles. 10 seconds, the passenger said. Don't look at them. Look at the road. I forced my eyes back to the asphalt. 5. The road looked shiny ahead. Black ice. 4. I can't do this, I whispered. 3. Yes, you can. 2. Make it count. 1. The tires lost traction. The rear of the car swung out. The world began to spin, and as the guardrail rushed toward me again, I heard him sigh. Attempt 413. Crunch.
Chapter 8. The Toll Booth. I trust technology too much. We all do. We surrender our agency to the soothing blue line of a GPS, assuming that the satellite in the sky knows better than our own intuition. I was driving from Chicago to St. Louis. It is a straight shot, a boring drive of cornfields and billboards, but at 2 a.m. my navigation app chimed. Traffic ahead, the synthesized voice announced. Recalculating, saving 40 minutes. I didn't question it. I was tired. 40 minutes meant I would be in my own bed 40 minutes sooner. So when the screen told me to take the next exit, I signaled right. The ramp was overgrown. Tall grass whipped against the sides of my sedan, sounding like dry whispers. The pavement was cracked, gray with age, and the painted lines had faded to ghostly suggestions. Continue for 5 miles, the GPS instructed. I drove. The further I went, the darker it got. The farmhouse lights vanished. The moon seemed to be swallowed by a thick, oppressive canopy of trees that crowded the asphalt. These weren't the polite, trimmed trees of the interstate. These were ancient, gnarled oaks that leaned over the road, their branches interlacing to form a tunnel. Then the road widened. Ahead, looming out of the mist, was a structure. It was a toll booth. It shouldn't have been there. Toll booths were obsolete on back roads, replaced by cameras and transponders. But this was a relic. It was a single concrete island with a rusted metal booth perched on top. The red and white barrier arm was down, blocking the lane. A single light bulb hung inside the booth. It was dim, casting a sickly, jaundiced glow on the dirty glass. I slowed down, my brakes squeaking in the silence. "This is ridiculous," I muttered. I rolled down my window to look for a card reader or a coin basket. There was neither. There was a man. He was sitting on a high stool inside the booth. He wore a uniform that looked like it belonged in the 1950s, a stiff dark blue cap and a heavy wool coat with brass buttons. He wasn't moving. He was staring straight ahead at the empty darkness beyond the barrier. I cleared my throat. "Excuse me." He didn't blink. He didn't turn. I felt a prickle of unease. I reached into my cup holder and grabbed a handful of quarters. "I don't have a pass," I said, leaning out the window. "How much is it?" Slowly, painfully slowly, the man turned his head. The movement was mechanical, jerky.
Like a rusted gear grinding into motion. He looked at me. The light inside the booth flickered. His face was pale, the skin pulled tight over his cheekbones like parchment, but it was his eyes that made my breath hitch. They were black, not dark brown, not dilated pupils. They were solid orbs of obsidian void. There was no white, no iris, just an endless, wet darkness that seemed to absorb the light from my dashboard. He didn't look at the money in my hand. He reached down and slid a small paper ticket through the slot in the glass. I hesitated. The air coming from the booth smelled of stale earth and formaldehyde. "Take it," he whispered. His voice sounded like dry leaves skittering on pavement. I took the ticket. My fingers brushed his glove. It was ice cold. I looked at the paper. It was heavy cardstock, yellowed with age. The old turnpike. Time in, 2:17 a.m. Time out, blank. The time out field was blank. "How much?" I asked again, my voice trembling. "You pay at the end," he said. "Where does this road go?" The man smiled. It was a thin, joyless stretching of lips that revealed gray gums. "It doesn't." Clack. The wooden barrier arm in front of my car jerked upward. I didn't wait to ask another question. The fear was sudden and overwhelming, a biological imperative to run. I slammed my foot on the gas. The tires spun on the slick concrete, and the car shot forward. I sped into the dark. I checked my rearview mirror. The toll booth was receding, a small island of yellow light in the blackness. "Crazy," I said, laughing nervously. "Just some weird old guy messing with people." I drove. The trees grew thicker. They formed a solid wall on either side of the road, their branches scraping the roof of my car. The road itself seemed to narrow, the asphalt becoming smoother, darker. I drove for 10 minutes, then 20. I should have hit a cross street. I should have seen a sign for a town. There was nothing, just the road. I glanced at the dashboard clock. 2:17 a.m. I frowned. That was impossible. I had been driving for at least 20 minutes. I looked at my phone. 2:17 a.m. No signal. I looked at the GPS screen. It was blank, just a gray void. "Okay," I said. "Okay, calm down." I pressed the accelerator, pushing the car to 80 miles per hour. The trees blurred into a solid tunnel. 10 more minutes passed. 2:17 a.m. And then I noticed the gas gauge. I had filled up in Springfield.
I had 3/4 of a tank. The needle was moving, visibly. It was ticking down toward empty, not in minutes, but in seconds. Tick, tick, tick. I was burning fuel at an impossible rate. "No," I whispered. "No, please." Panic set in. I slammed on the brakes. I was gonna turn around. I would go back to the booth. I would force the barrier up. I wrestled the steering wheel, executing a 3-point turn on the narrow road. My headlights swept across the trees. They were ancient, their bark looking like twisted faces. I pointed the car back the way I came. I floored it. I drove for what felt like an hour. The gas light dinged. Low fuel. The clock still read 2:17 a.m. I should have reached the booth by now. Then I saw lights ahead. Relief washed over me. Thank God. I slowed down as I approached. It was the toll booth, but something was wrong. I was approaching it from the front. The barrier arm was down, blocking my path, just as it had been before. I had turned around. I should have approached it from the rear. I stopped the car. My heart was thumping so hard it hurt. The man was still there, sitting on his stool. I didn't roll down my window this time. I stared at him. He turned his head. Those black, void eyes locked onto mine. He raised a hand and pointed a gloved finger at the ticket sitting on my passenger seat. I looked at it. The ink was wet. Time in, 2:17 a.m. Time out, blank. "Let me out," I screamed, hitting the glass. The man didn't move. He just pointed forward, into the dark. The barrier arm lifted. I didn't move. I refused. I put the car in reverse. I backed up, fast. I was gonna back all the way out of his hell. I hit 40 miles per hour in reverse, using the backup camera to navigate. I stared at the screen on my dashboard.
The road stretched out behind me, and then I saw it. In the camera feed, the toll booth. It wasn't getting smaller. It was following me. The concrete island, the rusted booth, the yellow light. It was sliding along the asphalt, keeping perfect pace with my car. The sparks flew from the base of the concrete as it ground against the road. The attendant was still inside. He was leaning forward, his face pressed against the glass of the booth, watching me. I slammed the car into drive. I screamed, a raw animal sound, and floored it forward again. I checked the rearview mirror. The booth was right on my bumper. It was chasing me. It didn't have an engine.
It didn't have wheels. It just glided, a monolith of judgment, forcing me deeper into the tunnel. My gas gauge hit empty. The engine sputtered. I am coasting now. The silence is returning. The clock says 2:17 a.m., and in the mirror, the yellow light is getting brighter. The barrier arm is up. The booth is open. He is waiting for me to stop. He is waiting to collect the toll. And I don't think he takes cash.
Chapter 9. Dead Air. There is a moment when exhaustion turns into delirium. It is a subtle shift. The edges of your vision blur, and the world takes on a dreamlike, fluid quality. I was driving home from a double shift. It was 3:45 a.m. The radio was off. The only sound was the hum of the engine and the rhythmic thump-thump of the tires on the expansion joints of the bridge. Then, my car's infotainment screen lit up. Connected to unknown device. I frowned. My phone was in my pocket. No one else was in the car. Before I could reach for the touchscreen to disconnect, the speakers crackled to life. Shh. Static. White noise. But underneath it, there was a sound. Breathing. It was wet, heavy, and labored. It sounded like someone was holding a microphone directly against their chest while struggling to draw air into fluid-filled lungs. Hello? I said, my voice sounding small in the cabin. Is someone there? The breathing stopped. Silence. Then, a whisper. It was genderless, raspy, and incredibly close. It sounded like it was coming from the headrest behind me, not the speakers. Pull over. I jumped, swerving slightly into the other lane. I corrected quickly, my heart racing. Who is this? I demanded, my hand hovering over the end call button on the steering wheel. I pressed it. The screen flashed call ended. Silence returned. I let out a shaky breath. Just a glitch, crossed wires. Beep. The screen lit up again. Incoming call, unknown. It answered itself. Pull over, the voice rasped, louder this time, more insistent. No, I said, gripping the wheel. Stop calling me. Pull over. Look at the water. I looked out the window. I was crossing the long causeway over Lake Pontchartrain. 24 miles of bridge over black water. There was nowhere to pull over, just a narrow shoulder and a concrete railing. There's nowhere to stop, I shouted at the dashboard. The navigation screen suddenly flickered. The map of the bridge disappeared. It was replaced by a new route. Destination, the deep. The blue line on the map didn't follow the road. It turned sharply to the right, directly off the bridge. Recalculating, the GPS voice said. It wasn't the standard robotic female voice. It was the whisper. Turn right now. I fought the urge to look at the screen. I'm not turning. The air in the car began to change. It grew heavy, damp.
The windows started to fog up from the inside, condensation dripping down the glass like sweat. Turn right, the voice hissed. No! Then the music started. It wasn't a song. It was a recording. It was the sound of splashing, frantic, desperate splashing, and screaming, muffled, underwater screaming. I recognized the voice. It was mine. I slammed my hand onto the power button for the radio. It didn't turn off. The volume knob spun freely, doing nothing. The screaming got louder, filling the car, vibrating through the seats. Make it stop, I yelled. Suddenly, the engine cut out. The power steering died. The brakes stiffened. The car began to coast, losing momentum. I wrestled the wheel, guiding the dead vehicle toward the narrow shoulder. I came to a stop inches from the concrete barrier. Silence. The screaming stopped. The static stopped. The car was dead. The dashboard was dark. I sat there, panting, listening to the blood rush in my ears. Outside, the lake was invisible in the darkness, just a vast black void beneath the bridge. Then my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. The screen was lit up. The camera app was open. It was in selfie mode, but it wasn't showing my face. It was showing the view from outside the car. The angle was low, looking up from the water. The dark waves were lapping at the bottom of the frame, and above the water, looking down from the bridge railing, was a figure. It was me. I was standing at the edge of the bridge, looking down. I looked up from the phone. I was still in the car. I was sitting in the driver's seat. I looked back at the screen. The figure on the bridge, the other me, was leaning over the railing. And then something broke the surface of the water in the video. A hand, pale, bloated, and huge. It shot up from the black water and grabbed the other me by the collar. I watched in horror on the tiny screen as I was yanked over the railing. There was no sound, just the visual of my body tumbling into the abyss. Splash. The water settled. Then the camera angle shifted. It began to rise. The phone in the video was moving. It was coming closer to the bridge, closer to my car. I looked out the window. A hand, wet, pale, and bloated, slapped onto the concrete railing right beside my door. Then another hand. Something was pulling itself up from the lake. I screamed and twisted the key. The engine roared to life. I didn't check the mirror. I didn't look back.
I stomped on the gas, peeling out onto the empty bridge, leaving the smell of lake water and rot behind me. But my phone is still recording. And sometimes when I'm driving alone at night, the Bluetooth connects, and I can hear the sound of wet footsteps, running, catching up.
Chapter 10. The Last Mile. Home is a concept, not a place. I have learned this the hard way. I turned onto Oak Street at 2:42 a.m. The familiarity of it was painful. I saw the neighbors' houses, dark and slumbering. I saw the Joneses' blue mailbox. I saw the sprawling oak tree that marked the entrance to my subdivision. My house was exactly 1 mile away. I could see the roofline in the distance, a black triangle against the purple night sky. A light was on in the porch. My wife leaves it on for me. A beacon, a promise. I gripped the steering wheel, my palms slick with sweat. "Please," I whispered, "just let me make it this time." I watched the odometer. 45,102 miles. I drove. The engine purred. The tires hissed on the damp asphalt. 45,102.8 miles. I held my breath. I pushed the gas pedal slightly, urging the car forward. The mailbox passed on my right. The fire hydrant passed on my left. 45,102.9 miles. Then, the world flickered. It wasn't a blink. It was a glitch in reality. The streetlights overhead buzzed violently, their orange glow turning a sickly, sterile white for a fraction of a second. The radio, which had been playing low static, cut to absolute silence. And then came the sound. Click, click, click. The sound of plastic gears grinding in reverse. I looked down at the dashboard. The numbers on the odometer were rolling backward. Fast. 45,102.8. 45,102.7. "No!" I screamed, slamming my fist against the wheel. "No, not again." I floored the accelerator. The engine roared, the RPMs redlining. The car should have surged forward. I should have been doing 80 miles per hour. But the scenery outside didn't speed up. The houses crawled by at a leisurely pace. The physics of the car had detached from the world outside. I was trapped in a bubble of distorted time. 45,102.5. I looked out the driver's side window, and there he was. walking on the sidewalk. He was under the flickering streetlight. He was wearing my jacket. He was wearing my jeans. He was me, but he was wrong. His left leg didn't work. It dragged behind him, the toe of the shoe scraping against the concrete with a wet, grinding sound that I could hear even through the closed glass. Step, drag, step, drag. His face was a mask of ruin. The jaw was slack, hanging at an impossible angle. One eye was swollen shut, a mass of purple bruising and dried blood. Last night, he had been 20 feet behind the car. Tonight, he was right beside my door.
I slammed on the brakes. The car didn't stop. It kept rolling, locked in its magnetic pull away from my home. The thing on the sidewalk turned its head. It looked at me with its one good eye. It wasn't angry. It wasn't mindless. It was patient. It reached out a hand. The fingers were broken, bent backward. Tap. 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 It knocked on my window. "Go away," I shrieked. I fumbled for the door lock, pressing it down, checking it twice. The odometer continued to unwind. 45,102.3. The car was moving backward now. Not physically, I was still facing forward, but I was losing ground. The house in the distance was getting smaller. The porch light was fading. The thing kept pace. It didn't run. It just walked. That horrible, rhythmic limping gait matching the speed of my retreat perfectly. Step, drag, tap, tap. "Why are you doing this?" I sobbed. The thing pressed its face against the glass. It left a smear of red on the window. Its lips moved. Through the glass, I heard the voice. It was my voice, but wet and gurgling, bubbling up through a throat filled with blood. It's my turn to drive. My blood froze. Suddenly, the car died. The engine cut out. The power steering failed. The car coasted to a halt in the middle of the dark street. Silence. The odometer stopped rolling. 45,102.0. Exactly 1 mile from home. I sat there, paralyzed. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't look away from the window. The thing was standing there, staring. Then it stopped knocking. It reached for the door handle. "It's locked," I whispered. "It's locked. It's locked." The handle lifted. Click. The lock plunger on the inside of the door popped up. Not by itself. It was pulled up by an invisible force from inside the cabin. The door swung open. The smell hit me instantly. Copper, gasoline, and the sweet, glowing scent of crushed flowers, the kind you smell at a funeral. The thing didn't attack me. It didn't drag me out. It simply leaned in, its broken face inches from mine. "You're tired," it whispered. "You've been driving for so long." I felt a wave of exhaustion wash over me, a heaviness that went down to my marrow. He was right. I was so tired. I had been driving this mile for eternity. "I just want to go home," I wept. "I know," the thing said. "That's why I'm here, to take you the rest of the way." It stepped back. It held the door open, a gesture of invitation. I unbuckled my seatbelt. My hands moved on their own. I stepped out of the car. My left leg collapsed under me. Pain, white-hot and blinding, shot up my hip. I cried out, grabbing the door frame to keep from falling. I looked down. My leg was twisted. My jeans were torn and soaked in blood. I touched my face. My jaw felt loose. My eye was swollen shut. I looked up. The thing, the clean, uninjured version of me, was sitting in the driver's seat. He adjusted the rearview mirror. He buckled the seatbelt. He looked at me standing on the asphalt, broken and bleeding. "Thank you," he said. He pulled the door shut. Slam. The engine roared to life. It sounded healthy, strong. He put the car in drive. I tried to shout, to tell him to stop, but only a wet gurgle came out of my throat. He drove away. I watched the taillights recede. I watched him drive toward the house, toward the porch light. He was going home. I turned to look down the dark, empty street behind me, the mile I had just lost. I took a step.
Scuff. My broken leg dragged across the pavement. I am walking now. I am in the shadows of the sidewalk. I am the thing that waits in the dark. And I know that tomorrow night, another car will come down this road, another version of me, thinking he is almost home. And I will be waiting, because I have to get back in the car. I have to get back in the driver's seat. It's the only way to finish the mile.